I'm going all in on this one.
I need a straitjacket and a muzzle.
What the is right? Eat your banana.
This is out of control.
Let's make it $3,000.
Yeah.
32. What about
I
30?
really need to get a muzzle for him.
Well, they're all done. Gotta go into what about 33.50 once, and I'm gonna go now. Sell it away for 250 big bucks. Jarrod, Brandy, 32.50. Goodbye.
Darrell Sheets spent years warning that someone was using his identity to destroy his life. But most people didn't take it seriously. Then he was found dead, and the official story didn't settle the questions. It made them worse.
A longtime A&E star has died. Darrell Sheets, who starred on Storage Wars from 2010 to 2023, was found dead at a residence in Lake Havasu City, Arizona around 2 a.m. April 22nd. Police told E! News in a statement. He was 67.
After his tragic death, Jarrod Schulz broke his silence, and what he revealed about Darrell's final moments raised even more uncomfortable questions about what was really happening behind the scenes. Was this just a tragic ending, or the result of something people missed in plain sight? Join us as we find out what Jarrod Schulz revealed about Darrell Sheets' final moments. The missing hours. Before anyone started asking what Jarrod knew, there was one fact nobody could get past: 9 hours. That's the gap between the last image of Darrell Sheets alive and the moment Lake Havasu City Police were breaking into his home on Chandler Drive. It was around 2 in the morning when the call came in, a report of a deceased individual. When officers arrived, they found a 67-year-old man with what appeared to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Toxicology came back clean. No substances in his system, no sign of struggle. Just a man alone in the house he had moved to for a quieter life. He had left behind the chaos of Los Angeles, the auctions, the cameras, the crowds, and settled in a small desert city where he thought he could finally just exist. Until the world found out. The news broke fast, but the early details didn't bring clarity, only confirmation. By the morning of April 23rd, headlines were everywhere. Darrell Sheets was dead at 67. The cause listed as he took his own life. But official confirmation still didn't answer anything. The network and the show said nothing. Cast members stepped back behind closed doors, processing in private, while the public was left with silence. Fans who had followed Darrell since the show launched in 2010 kept refreshing their feeds, searching for answers that weren't coming. Social media filled the gap the way it always does, with grief, anger, speculation, and the kind of unchecked rumors that spread fastest when no real answers are being given. Darrell wasn't just another cast member, he was one of the original faces of the franchise, debuting the same year the show launched. For 15 seasons, he was one of its central figures, the risk-taker, the gambler, the man who bet big on unknown storage lockers the way others bet on horses. His nickname, the Gambler, wasn't just branding for television. It fit the way he moved through the world. So when the news came that Darrell Sheets had apparently taken his own life, it didn't land as just another headline. It landed as disbelief. And in the silence that followed, something unexpected surfaced. Jarrod Schulz, speaking for the first time in years. Jarrod Schulz hadn't been part of the Storage Wars world in years. His exit was messy, public, and painful. After a domestic violence charge in 2021, the network moved on completely. He had no platform in that space, no relationship with the show, and no real reason anyone expected to hear from him again. The cast kept their distance. So did the fan base. But after Darrell's death, Jarrod knew something that would reshape how people understood those final 9 hours. What exactly did he reveal? And why did it push the people closest to Darrell to start talking about something that went far beyond grief? Something darker and far more complicated than what the headlines were saying? a warning hidden in plain sight. 6 weeks before he died, Darrell Sheets told the world exactly what was happening to him. On March 9, 2026, he posted on Facebook saying he had been hacked by what he called a very evil person. He explained that a fake page was being run in his name, using his face and identity to spread false information to people in Lake Havasu. He made it clear that the posts coming from that account were not his. He said he was extremely sorry and sick over what was being done in his name. He wrote that the people behind it had ruined him, just as they had said they would. The post, sitting on his public Facebook page for anyone to read, wasn't just venting. It was a man laying out what he believed was being done to him, and by whom. He also wrote that if anything happened to him, people should look into what he called his alleged cyberbully. That sentence sat on his Facebook page for 6 weeks, and almost nobody noticed it. While Darrell went about his days running his antique shop, Havasu Show Me Your Junk, it was still there in plain sight. He kept on clearly, publicly drawing a map to what he believed was destroying him. 2 days later, on March 11th, he posted again, this time laying out the scale of what he believed was happening. He said the person wasn't just targeting him. They were using his name to go after other small businesses in Lake Havasu, harassing them and even extorting money from people in the community while pretending to be him. He described it as a full takeover of his identity across phone calls, messages, emails, and websites. Whoever was behind it hadn't just stolen his name. They had built a second version of him, one meant to make people in his own community doubt him. And he said he had been dealing with it for 3 years. This wasn't a sudden crisis that arrived in the weeks before April 22nd. It was a slow, deliberate campaign that wore a man down piece by piece. And by the time most people outside his circle understood what was happening, it had already done most of its damage. Darrell said he went to the police. He wrote it himself in the post, explaining that they were aware of the situation, but said their hands were tied because the platform where it was happening allowed it to continue. He reported it, spoke about it publicly, and did everything you're supposed to do when you're being targeted. But the page stayed up. The fake accounts kept going, and the messages didn't stop. Jarrod wasn't reading about this after the fact. He knew while it was happening, not from a news article, but because Darrell had told him directly. And what Jarrod later made clear, through his posts and through comments shared by people close to him, was that, in his view, the cyberbullying wasn't just a factor in Darrell's death. It was the thread that, pulled long enough and hard enough, unraveled everything else. So what exactly was being done to him, and why, after 3 years of trying, was no one able to stop it? When Darrell stopped fighting. Everyone who dealt with Darrell said the same thing. He never gave ground unless he absolutely had to. It didn't matter if he was bidding on a storage locker in the middle of the day or sitting across from someone trying to lowball him on a sale. He held his position, pushed back, and squeezed every negotiation until the other side broke first. That wasn't for the cameras. That was just who he was. Co-star Dusty Riach, who worked with him on multiple deals, described him as someone with the kind of passion that refused to leave money on the table. He even remembered a deal where Darrell went back and forth over just $50. $50. Treating it like it mattered just as much as anything else. Darrell had a collection of estate items he was selling, pieces he had personally curated over decades. Furniture, artwork, antiques, the kind of inventory only someone with his eye and experience could assemble. He had set his price at $125,000. That was his number, and for Darrell, that would normally be the starting point before the real negotiation even began. But when the buyer came back with $50,000, something happened that had never happened before. Darrell said, "Okay." He didn't counter or push back, just a quiet, flat agreement to take less than half of what he had been asking. The gap wasn't even close. In any other version of Darrell Sheets, that conversation would have ended with him walking away from the table and coming back days later, grinding the buyer down until the number moved. That was always how he worked. Instead, he took the loss and moved on like it didn't matter anymore. Dusty, describing the moment, said it felt like watching a man put his affairs in order, like someone who already understood how things were going to end. He said it was completely out of character. And it wasn't just the deal. Darrell's social media presence, never especially heavy to begin with, had been going quiet in a way that felt different. His last Instagram post came in December 2025. His last Facebook post before the March warnings came in February 2026. For a man who ran a physical shop, was a recognizable face in his community, and had spent years living in the public eye, that kind of silence carried weight. He was disappearing from his own life in slow motion. Dave Hester saw it too. The last time he and Darrell were in the same place was at the Long Beach flea market, before Darrell moved to Lake Havasu. Dave noticed something had shifted. The man in front of him wasn't the same person he had known for years. It wasn't anything Darrell said directly. It was the space around him, the weight he seemed to be carrying. Dave told him straight to take better care of himself, to get help if he needed it. He thought it had gotten through. That was the last conversation they ever had. Looking back, what's haunting about all of this isn't that the signs were hidden. They weren't. They were there in the deals, in the silences, in the social media posts, in the quiet strain of a man who had filed reports, made public warnings, and still watched what he believed was happening continue without stopping. The problem was that nobody fully understood what those signs were pointing toward until it was too late to change the outcome. But the people around Darrell had only ever seen pieces of it. Laura Dotson was one of the first to start seeing the full picture. And what the family shared with her was something even those closest to him hadn't fully understood until it was too late. The fear he couldn't escape. When Laura Dotson called Darrell's family after the news broke, she wasn't prepared for what they told her. It wasn't something she could process easily, especially after everything they had shared over the years in and out of the auction rooms. As one half of the auctioneer duo at the center of storage wars, she had spent years watching the cast from the front of the room, close enough to read people, and experienced enough to know when something was real and when it was being performed. After Darrell died, she did not go to social media for answers. She went to his family. There she learned that it had been going on since 2023. Sustained, targeted harassment from someone who seemed intent on destroying Darrell's reputation, his sense of safety, and the place he had built for himself in a community he considered home. Laura later shared what the family told her in an interview with Us Weekly. She said the bullying had made Darrell feel worthless, as if everything he had built no longer mattered. It had damaged something inside him that his physical presence and on-screen confidence had always hidden, leaving a side of him that few people ever got to see. She said it directly. Nobody thought to look for cracks in someone who seemed that solid. But those cracks had been there for a long time, unnoticed by most people around him. Real people started showing up at his shop because of what the fake page was saying. Strangers coming in, expecting a version of Darrell Sheets that didn't exist, and he had no way to stop it because the page spreading it all was still up. He was terrified, Laura said, not only for himself, but for the people around him. He couldn't understand why he had been targeted, or what the person behind it was trying to achieve. That uncertainty, mixed with 3 years of trying and failing to make it stop, wore him down in ways his public smile never revealed. Renee Nazoda, who was friends with Darrell off-camera despite their on-screen rivalry, later spoke out in the days after the death. He shared his anger openly, saying the situation had gone far beyond what most people realized. According to him, the person behind the harassment had impersonated Darrell across multiple platforms, phone calls, messages, emails, and websites, and had even told Darrell directly that the goal was to ruin him. It was never about money. There was nothing Darrell could pay, no deal he could make, and no way to negotiate an end. The intent was simple and relentless: destruction. Renee pointed to the Facebook post from March 9th as proof that Darrell had been asking for help in plain sight. He also criticized the platforms for letting it continue and questioned law enforcement, saying they either knew what was happening or couldn't stop it before it reached the point it eventually did. At that stage, the only confirmed detail was that police had his phone. Beyond that, nothing was clear, and more answers were still expected to come out over time. Through all of it, the tributes, the anger, the investigation, and the shock, one figure kept coming back into the story. Someone who no longer had any official role in the storage wars world. Someone who had every reason to stay quiet and stay out of it. But who, as it turned out, was not finished speaking. Weeks after Darrell's death, most people had already started to move on in their own way, returning to their routines and letting the shock slowly fade into the background. Jarrod hadn't, and the reason for that changes how everything that came before it is understood. Where the questions began. By the time the tributes were posted, the interviews had aired, and the first wave of grief had started to fade. Most of the Storage Wars cast had already said what they needed to say and gone back to their private lives. Jarrod didn't. That's what sets him apart from everyone else who spoke. The others were grieving. Jarrod was building a case. He was the only one treating what happened to Darrell not just as a tragedy, but as something that should have been stopped and wasn't, and now needed answers. What Jarrod revealed was that Darrell hadn't been coping. He had been enduring. Not the kind of exhaustion tied to age or health, but something heavier. Month after month, nothing was resolved. The longer it went on, the more the fake version of him spread, reaching further and doing more damage, while every attempt he made to stop it led nowhere. The police were aware, but couldn't act. The platforms kept the pages online, and by the time the people around him finally realized how serious it had become, Darrell had already been carrying it alone for too long. In a city where strangers were walking into his shop expecting someone he was never meant to be. Jarrod said he believed the investigation would eventually confirm what he already understood: that the cyberbullying wasn't just something happening in the background leading up to April 22nd. In his view, it was the reason everything reached that point, and he made it clear he wasn't going to let that be reduced to a simple conclusion in a report or closed case. The Mojave County Medical Examiner officially ruled the death as self-inflicted. Toxicology results came back clean. What the findings suggested was a clear-headed man who had been under pressure for a long time, who had tried more than once to get help, and who ultimately made a decision in the early hours of April 22nd that no one around him had been able to stop. He had made it clear where people needed to look. The police now had his phone. The question was whether that would actually be enough to move things forward. The investigation was still ongoing, and even weeks after his death, the person behind 3 years of targeted harassment had not been publicly named or charged. Out of respect for the active case, that name isn't included here. But Darrell knew it, He had said it publicly before, and now the police had the device that could confirm more. That gap between what Darrell asked for and what the system managed to do in time is what Jarrod couldn't let go of. Laura couldn't ignore it either. It was also what Renee had spoken out about in frustration, calling out the platforms that let it continue and the law enforcement agencies that were aware of it but unable to stop it. Darrell Sheets spent his entire career taking risks that most people would never go near. Over more than 30 years in the storage auction business, he built a reputation for turning abandoned storage units into major finds, and that work eventually became 15 seasons of television that viewers followed closely. Off camera, people who knew him described a man who valued his family, his grandchildren, his community, and the quieter life he built in Lake Havasu after stepping away from the spotlight. And somewhere, there is still someone who knows exactly who spent 3 years working to take that life away from him. Darrell filed the reports and named the person publicly. So, when the system still couldn't protect him, who is supposed to be held responsible for that gap? And if someone is eventually charged, would that actually bring closure to the people who loved Darrell? Or would it only confirm that the warnings were there from the start and should have been taken seriously much earlier? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.